All right. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us this morning and welcome to today's program. Before we do get started, I want to make sure that everybody can see and hear us. See if you can just let us know in the chat that you can hear me and see me. Okay, wonderful. Great. Okay. So thank you everybody for joining us this morning. We have a great big group here, and the LACONI POP board is excited to present how to set up your hybrid programming for success. My name is Rachael. I am your host for this program. I'm an info services librarian at the Arlington Heights Memorial Library, where my focus is on programming for our business and entrepreneurial community. I've spent 3 years as a programming librarian prior to my current role, and I'm currently the vice president of the LACONI POP board. So on behalf of the entire board, we'd like to thank you for attending the program. Just a few things that we want to go over before we get started. Our program will feature 3 presentations from our panelists. Rachael Rezek, who is a community services librarian from the Fremont Public Library. Anthony Kierna, who is the genealogy coordinator from the Schaumburg Township Library, and Justin Jackola, who is the owner of JJack Productions, which is a video production company based out of Chicago. So we are recording this program, and we will send it out to everyone who registered once the link becomes available. We will also send out the slides and the presenter contact information. So since this is a webinar, we cannot see any of you. So for any questions at the end, we will definitely have time for a Q&A at the end. If you could type in your questions into the Q&A feature, that would be great. So we will be able to look through the questions using the Q&A feature. So I think once again, I'd like to thank everyone who made this program possible, and would like to introduce our first presenter, Rachael Rezek.
Folks, I'm so glad everyone can be here today. I'm just going to pull up my slides so we can hop right in. Here we go. Okay, so as Lev said, I'm community services librarian at Fremont in Mundelein. We are a medium-sized library in middle of Lake County, and we've been really lucky with our programs. We have pretty good attendance. So before COVID came down, we were doing 2 really large programs per week that I would run, lectures, concerts, and history stuff, probably quite in line with what everyone is doing. We would do small group crafts for adults. I do all of our adult program, if I didn't make that clear. We would do small group gatherings throughout the day, and then we also have community-oriented programs like tutoring and ESL and caregiver support groups. When COVID came down, we had to pivot, like we all did. And for the time being, what we're doing is 2 large programs every week in the evening via Zoom. They're generally lectures, occasionally living history performances. We rarely do concerts because even prior to COVID, our attendance wasn't great. And I think our patrons think the sound quality is not going to be where it should be. And what I found is sometimes they're right. So I don't book those quite as much since they still tend to be expensive. We are doing our book discussions and writing group on Zoom, but we are talking about bringing that back in person, and we do some crafting over Zoom or using Creative Bug, and that's asynchronous. Everything else we are still evaluating and will gradually be bringing back into the fall. So last March, as soon as we canceled everything, I went to administration and said, can we please offer programs over Zoom? They said, sure, try whatever you can to keep our patrons happy and connected to our community, and make sure that we know that they're all doing well and that we're still here for them. So we launched an e-newsletter, which was our first, and it quickly grew to several thousand patrons. And because of that, and because I made some phone calls in the beginning just to get people willing to try it, we were able to keep a lot of our previous audience. So some of our programs have upwards of 200, which is certainly not something our meeting room can accommodate. So I apologize if you hear any banging in the background. Our facilities is doing some renovations in the room right next to mine. So immediately, as soon as we got back into the building last June, I made a proposal to our administration saying, hey, patrons are telling me they really like these Zoom programs. Can we look into doing some sort of hybrid arrangement in the fall when we're able to do in-person programs? And that was very naive because it'll be a full year before we are able to even do that. So we will be starting that this coming fall. I will say administration was really on board with that because they recognize that a lot of our patrons, even prior to COVID, can't drive in the evening, can't drive at all, rely on a spouse or a neighbor or a child to bring them here, or for the younger audience, they have kids themselves and they can't come to programs because they're driving around, attending sporting events, but they'd still like to attend or get a recording afterwards. So everyone's really on board with this. Our current plan is to go very slowly with bringing back in-person programming. Next month, we will start having some of our smaller book groups in person, and we'll be doing those hybrid. I'll talk about how in just a minute. We're going to continue offering all of our high demand programs for adults in person, and we're going to add the hybrid option this fall. And our priority in what we bring back first is going to be the most high demand programs. So for us, that is going to be lectures. You have to know your audience, you have to know what they want, what your staffing is going to accommodate, for how you prioritize, where you focus your time for figuring out which hybrid options you need to pursue first. I'm a one-person shop when it comes to our programs. Our staffing is pretty lean, so it's just me running the programs. And I don't have much backup, and I don't want to have to rely on them all the time. So any solution that we do come up with has to be something that's pretty much plug and play, so that I don't have to do too much training and I don't have to divide too much of my time in the meeting room between running a hybrid program and paying attention to the in-person audience and in-person speaker. So I think we all are going to have to prioritize what's going to be required for our own libraries and go from there. My hope is to under-promise and to way over-deliver. So we're going to start small. And just based on the feedback that I'm getting from patrons, I think we're going to have really high uptake on our hybrid option, the Zoom option, because all of our patrons are saying, you know, I just really love this. I hope you plan on continuing this. I don't know when I'm going to be comfortable coming back in person, and I don't know if I want to give up being able to eat dinner while I watch this program. We get a lot of that. So I'm sure I'm not alone in that, but I'm prepared to have a much smaller audience, regardless of what our room can accommodate and what we're comfortable accommodating. So our meeting room, for the main meeting room that we use for our programs, is 40 by 80. We can accommodate just under 140 people. Our normal programs bring in about 80 people. And our equipment is pretty straightforward. We're not super fancy like some of the bigger libraries, but we do have installed equipment rather than portable equipment for most of our programs. So we've got a ceiling projector and a wall-mounted screen. We use HDMI unless we're having technical problems, and that's to connect our laptop to the sound system or to connect to other peripherals that we might need. And then we have 2 wireless microphones that use body mics and 1 handheld speaker, and our computer is on a laptop on a portable podium. So probably not too unusual for what some of you folks have. When we're planning what we're going to do, we are making sure that we don't invest a ton initially, so that if we need to adjust, if something's not working, we haven't sunk $3,000 or $4,000 into this that we have to then go back and justify to our board. Our board is very supportive, but they still want us to be very cautious with what we spend and responsible to our community. So we are always going to go with a simpler, lower cost option rather than anything too fancy. As I said, most of our staff are not super tech savvy. So if they're going to fill in for me, it needs to be very simple and straightforward. And quite honestly, if I need to troubleshoot something, I'm not going to have a ton of time. And I want to make sure neither audience is disappointed. To that point, any option that we come up with has to make sure, we have to make sure that it's not going to interfere with the in-room audience. And it can't get in the way of what the speaker is going to be doing, especially when we have the ladies wearing their 50-pound costumes with the corsets and the boning, and who wants to have to deal with technology that's going to slow you down and get in your way. The audio is the biggest hurdle that we have. It needs to be crisp and clear. We sometimes have problems with that, even pre-COVID, with our standard sound system. So anything that we add to it needs to at least be of that quality. And what I've noticed is I can't find a simple out-of-the-box solution for the audio that doesn't require additional wearable components, let's call them. So this is what we're doing. We have purchased a GoPro. We had some circulating. We bought a new one that's just for programs. We bought a relatively inexpensive Bluetooth USB wireless microphone that comes with a body pack and a couple different options for the audio. And then we're looking at some different options for the video as well for the living history. The video component really only comes into play for performance-based programs like our living history portrayals. And I'll get to that in just a sec. So for our lectures, basically, lectures are the easiest thing in the world to do over Zoom. You connect your laptop to your audio, to your screen. You make sure that your speaker is using Zoom and that they're signed in. They click the link just like if they were doing it remotely from home. And then you go from there. You'll want to use a second laptop for the host. So for me, I'll be in the back with a second laptop to answer Q&A, to troubleshoot anything, to admit people if they have problems, so that it's not interfering with the speaker. You would not want them acting as host because you're not going to run up there and try and fix things while they're in the middle of their lecture. Hopefully you're not. And then for the audio, basically what we're going to be doing is using for the in-room audience, our standard sound system with the wireless mic and the body pack. And we're still experimenting with ways to connect that to our computer for the sound for the home audience, but so far we don't have any ports available. So we are using that USB microphone. So all of our speakers will be wearing 2 wireless mic packs and 2 lavalier mics clipped to their shirt or their tie or what have you. For the ladies, they often don't have clothing that accommodates that. So we are buying a belt that they can put on. And yeah, that's as terrible as it sounds, but we've tested it. I've presented using it and it works. It's there's no lag that I've noticed in the audio for that remote audience with the USB mic. It doesn't seem to add too much of a burden for the speaker in the room. So we're going from there. For the performances, we have 2 options that we found. The one that I prefer is the video camera hooked up to a laptop, run through Zoom, cameras on a tripod. We're trying to use a wired internet connection when possible. And then the audio is again for that USB microphone. The other option, if option A is not working, is we have a really nice fancy iPad that we can connect to our tripod if we have to. The thing is, for both of those, or for option B, you do need a second laptop to act as host so that you're not standing up there with your iPad. As I said, currently for our camera, we're using a GoPro, but we're looking at 2 or 3 different options, progressively more expensive, but so far the lower cost options seem to be working pretty well. Any other just minor considerations? I've tested and tested and tested, and we're not having any problems with mics picking up ambient noise. as we add the audience. That is something I'm going to continue to test. So don't think that you can do this and be done. You're going to have to kind of stay on top of things and keep testing and keep adjusting as you go. So I would honestly say the first 6 months to a year, depending on how many hybrid programs you're doing, are what you're going to be adjusting as you go. Little side note for the Q&A, make sure that your speaker reads the question so that your audience at home knows what's being asked. Even for our live programs in room, we have people say, I don't know what the question was, what are you talking about? If you buy a USB Bluetooth microphone, you can also find them that have 2 headsets so that you can do your introduction mic'd for the home audience, because from my testing, they can't hear anything that I say through our in-room system. It's just not loud enough, so they're not picking it up. That may not be a big deal for your audience. My audience does kind of complain about things like that, so that's why we're going to be using a second connection that can go through just the one USB receiver that goes into the laptop. For small groups, we're not really doing crafts, but we do have an option for that. We're getting an Elmo device, which is, it's basically, from what I can see, it's basically an iPad that's all pre-programmed. It comes on its own stand. You plug it into the USB port on your computer. If you don't want to do that and you have a tablet, you absolutely can connect those to the USB port on your laptop, put it on a tripod, and project from there. In a pinch, I've used my phone. The hitch is your presenter needs to be good enough to be able to handle 2 audiences. So I'm going to be honest, we are currently not going to be doing hybrid crafts. They're either going to be in person or they're going to be over Zoom. So we'll work that out. In 6 months from now, we can reassess and go from there. And then for book groups, we have a couple options. We're either going to be doing 2 sessions, one virtual, one in person, or we're going to be using our 360-degree omnidirectional microphones rather than using a meeting owl, because they're expensive and we already have the other devices. So we're kind of thinking a laptop hooked up to Zoom is more than sufficient. And we can pivot if we need to. We're happy to purchase new equipment, but we want to do this, as I said, in a way that's sensitive to our taxpayers' dollars. So we're gonna take it in increments and go from there. As I said, the one thing we really don't know is if we can connect our current audio system to any of the cameras or to the computer using a mixer. Definitely something for you folks to look into. Right now, we don't seem to have enough ports available, and we're not going to purchase several $1,000s worth of audio equipment until we know for sure that we need to and that it's going to work. We've run into problems with that. And that is all I have, folks. I think we're taking questions at the end, so we will get to those later.
Yes, we will be. We will have time for a Q&A. So Rachel, thank you. Our next presenter is Tony Kierna, who is the genealogy coordinator at the Schaumburg Township District Library. Tony, it's all yours.
Thank you. Okay, everybody, hopefully my screen's up there. You see what's going on. I do want to share with everybody a little bit more of a technical approach, how we did this with equipment that our library currently had. And much of it was sort of related to how to go ahead and we're going to do this hybrid programming testing thing. Well, our goal has been sort of that we want to have the meeting room basically so that it's set up so that we're having a real live audience in the room and stuff. We definitely want the speaker that would be present in the room for the presentations at the same time. We're also hoping that that in this case, we're trying a little bit more of a difficult approach, I think, where we're not going to have the speaker basically connected to Zoom in any way, shape, or form. And hopefully that's our goal. There are still workable alternatives. Some of this, what Rachael even mentioned, may apply to some of the stuff that I'm going to bring up here. Obviously, the program that we do have set up when we do our genealogy program, as an example, we would do it as a webinar with me as a host, being in the back of the room, and we would record the program also, so that our audience, both in the room and those who would be participating on Zoom, would at a future date be able to review that program generally through our own YouTube channel. We do have the lights dimmed in the room. I know that sounds pretty simple, but when we did the test, and that's one of the things I'm going to go over with you here, we sort of did it in a pretty bright room in the middle of the day, and that did affect the ability for the screen not to be as crisp as we had hoped it to be. But we would definitely be doing that in the future. One thing we've sort of come to our own conclusion is, if we do it this way, it's almost going to be a necessity that there will be two people from the library working the program to make it a success. One person will be working the camera and monitoring the audio, and our other person would be basically the person watching all of the Zoom interactions that are going on from our audience. So how can we make this program work? Well, one of the ways that our library is at least moving in the direction of trying to make this happen is we are able to basically utilize almost all of the equipment that we currently have. So we don't really have any kind of an investment other than one option that I'm going to bring up here. So we have our camcorder, we have our tripod, we have our dual wireless microphones. I've been involved in using all of this equipment when I've been doing Veterans History Project interviews. So I feel pretty good how it's been working and working quite reliably. The other thing that we have that's new is a device called a Camling 4K. And what this device is, it is a device that connects midpoint between the HDMI output of the camcorder and then connects from that point on the 4K Camling 4K device to the laptop via a USB connection. And the thing too that I know Rachael mentioned earlier, and we have not done this with our test, but we're pretty sure we're going to be doing it with the test, is almost that rather than connecting to our library's wireless system, we're probably going to test it and connect through an Ethernet, which is much more reliable. Here's some of the equipment that we basically have been using for our Veterans History Project interviews that we can certainly use for hybrid Zoom programs of the future. We've got a Canon camcorder. We've got a tripod that we're using, very simple. This is probably what was our biggest investment, which is a dual wireless microphone setup that we use. It's working pretty good. One thing I will always suggest, and I don't have it in my slides here, but probably the most inexpensive and probably the best piece of equipment that anybody can invest in is a simple battery tester. I can't tell you how many times that we would be wanting to do something and we discovered that the batteries that we were going to use for a Veterans History Project interview were sort of on the weak side. So we wanted to replace that. This is the device I mentioned here. It's called the Camling 4K, and that's this very simple device. It basically allows the camcorder that we're using to become the video source for the Zoom. And I show this slide up here just so you get an idea. When you're connected in Zoom through the Camling 4K device, this is how you see a message come up in the selection list from Zoom that allows you to pick your video source. And then this next one allows you to pick your audio source. So for us, because the camcorder becomes the video source, the wireless microphones that we will use for programs will be wirelessly transmitting to the receiver that is also connected to the camcorder into the microphone jack. So all of this comes into play. And like I said, we've done a test on it and it came out actually pretty good. Ethernet cable, like I said, we did a test the first time with Wi-Fi. It worked, but we actually had and discovered that we got bumped out of Zoom And so we went back in and everything was good at that point, but we weren't sure if perhaps it was because we were using our own wireless connection, and testing and using an Ethernet cable certainly should improve that. So how would our meeting room be set up? We have a fairly large meeting room. When I was doing genealogy programs, we often had anywhere between 40 to 60 people in our room. So for us, all of our equipment would be in the back of the room. We'd have a flat top cart with the laptop on top of it, tripod with the camcorder on, the HDMI output connected to the laptop, dual wireless microphones, one for the employee like me who would be involved, possibly interacting with our Zoom audience. And the speaker, as Rachel even mentioned earlier too, we would expect our speaker to be wearing 2 wireless microphones, one that would be intended for the Zoom audience and one that would be intended for the in-room participating audience. So how does this all come together when we try to do this? So again, camcorder that we had that we didn't have to invest any more money into, that becomes our video source for Zoom through the 4K link device. That's the critical part here. The dual wireless microphones become both the audio source for Zoom, and the additional microphone that the speaker is wearing becomes that source of audio for the in-house audience. And for me then, if I'm in the back of the room with the camcorder, I can now begin to focus on the screen that the presenter is connected to and is projecting onto the screen, because initially, as we're sort of planning this, the speaker will not be connected to Zoom. So he can focus on his presentation. He could literally walk a little bit around the room, and so on and so forth for that. So we're going to try and do it that way. And it did work out pretty good, I think. So we're going to have one employee in the back with the camera, second employee monitoring the chat and Q&A. I think this is probably going to be one of the most challenging things for us to do with 2 people, because as almost all of us have experienced, when you're doing a 100% Zoom program, it's me as the host and the speaker. So when the speaker is doing his thing, I'm doing my thing, monitoring the Zoom process. But when you've got a dual audience, Zoom and in-house, it becomes a lot more challenging, I would say, to do that. So we see 2 employees possibly being needed for this process. And camcorder, when I say is 95% focus on the screen, it does allow me, if possible, if the speaker is moving around a little bit, I can pan the camera to focus on the speaker. But I definitely would see that for, as I guessed here, 95% of the time, I would be focused on the screen where the presenter's PowerPoint is being projected. So for the presenter, he's not connected to Zoom in this scenario that we tested. He has 2 wireless microphones, one again for the in-house audience and one again for the Zoom audience. Speaker can focus on his presentation and focus on the audience at hand without him being too technically involved in anything with the Zoom process. So when the presenter does his thing, gives the program, and I know Rachel mentioned this too, here's where now we've got to juggle and we've got to get all the questions coming into play so that everybody that's participating is hearing the questions. So for the in-person questions that come up, obviously if I'm in the back, I'm in the spot with the wireless microphone for the Zoom audience, it would be up to me to repeat those questions for the Zoom audience. For those questions that come in from the Q&A or the chat from the Zoom audience, once again, this is sort of a dual role because I have to repeat it obviously for the presenter as well as for the in-house audience, but also when we're doing our webinars online, we're not allowing the participants to do all kinds of interaction amongst themselves. So when they submit chat questions, others do not see them. And at the end of the program, that's where I'm going over all of the chat questions that came in, all of the Q&A questions that came in from the Zoom audience. So too, at this point, now with the camcorder in the back of the room, I can start focusing 100% on the presenter, since we're no longer necessarily focused on anything more with the screen in his presentation. So how did we do this test? So we did obviously set up our Zoom webinar to do the testing. We did it pretty simple, pretty straightforward, connected to Zoom with Wi-Fi. But again, we probably will be doing this again, and we want to bring in our Ethernet connection. We did our selection from the Camling 4K device. We had one person act as our speaker. We had one person act as our host. I was the lucky one for that. And we had one person that acted as our Zoom participant, who initially was in the room, but I had asked them to actually step out of the room so that they wouldn't be hearing this overlap of real sound coming from us versus what would be coming over their speaker on their laptop. So we did that. They were standing out by the door, I can tell you this, through the window. And so I could focus on them and they could give me thumbs up or thumbs down on what was going on, or their observations on what was going on. So what did we think when we did this test? We did record it in Zoom. And I will say this, it was a little bit chaotic because we were just sort of talking to each other amongst ourselves, even though we weren't all completely separated from this. So that was sort of fun and interesting to be able to go over that. We did the test in a bright, sunny room. We didn't have access to the light stuff because the room was currently being used for storage and we couldn't get access to it. But it was still mechanically, everything worked fine. We didn't do anything because we needed to see the process of the setup of the laptop, the equipment, the camcorder. So that's why we did it under those circumstances. But I think in a second test, we would definitely try and do it specifically to bring down the light to make the intensity of the screen projection a lot better and a lot better to pick up. The video, as I mentioned earlier, it was for the most part, nobody said it was horrible when we evaluated looking at the recording. But I know we can do better, and we will do better in a follow-up test. The one thing that I know Rachel mentioned earlier too, sound is absolutely critical for this. And I was absolutely amazed at how well the recording that we did of this test showed that the sound was really picking up well, both from the person who was acting as the speaker and myself as the host. And we also felt that the sound that the speaker was, that the microphone, the added microphone the speaker was wearing for the room, we felt that that was picking up quite well too. So we felt very good about the audio part that was coming in. One thing I mentioned earlier, I have no idea why, if this was a Wi-Fi problem connection from us to Zoom, but we did get bumped out of Zoom for some reason. So we went back in, continued with the program as best as we could. It was sort of puzzling. I have no idea, but I think, again, an Ethernet connection would help for that. This was probably the most unique thing that we discovered that I have no answer for. And for all I know, it could be happening in real live webinars that are going on. The fact that we had the three of us in the room, I was asking the participant who was acting in that role to chat me some questions so I could see what was going on. And I was being told by that person over and over that she had chatted to me lots of things. I have no idea, but it actually turned out to be a lag delay of almost 10 minutes before I started seeing those chat questions come in. So that was a little bit troubling, and I'm not sure why. And that's why I'm saying we're going to try and do another test and see what would come up with that. So if we're going to go ahead and do a second test, what would be some of the changes that we would be making in the process? We definitely will be doing this one with an Ethernet connection rather than our Wi-Fi connection. Probably the way we understand it is that our podium at the front of the room is where an Ethernet connection could be made to the laptop that's there for the benefit of the speaker. But since we will have the laptop and all the equipment in the back of the room, we will be in need of probably at least a 50-foot Ethernet connection. And I was told by our IT staff that that should be functional and workable. Going to do a test to see if we can maybe not get bumped off of Zoom this time, and hopefully that should not happen. One of the things, just so you know, I am not a technical geek on a lot of this stuff. A lot of these ideas for how I decided to attempt to do this came from looking at the internet, came from looking at YouTube, how to do some of this stuff. But I will say that I think when we're going to do another test, we are going to invite one of our IT employees into the room so that they could observe with us, offer suggestions. And obviously, if we're going to use the Ethernet connection, I was told that I would need the laptop that I would use to be set up in order to be able to do it that way. So we would do that invitation as a courtesy to get them in and seek additional advice on setups here. The lag time, that's still, that has to, I would hope it's definitely got to improve on a second test. The other thing too, we'll probably do this in a room where we have more access to the light controls and things weren't blocked off from us, and pull down the shades and everything. So we'll be able to see in a darker room, I have no doubt. And I'm very confident that the PowerPoint projection onto the screen will come up quite well. Probably another thing, instead of just one speaker, one tester, one host for me, and then one participant, I think we want to add a few more people into the role of this so that we've got specifically more Zoom participants varied throughout our library as testing. And we do want to do a little bit of a lengthier PowerPoint because, like I said, we were sort of scrambling a little bit during the test. And I think we want to simulate the PowerPoint a little bit more in a follow-up test. So my question to all of you guys is, are you guys ready to take the plunge? Because I'm telling you, it's a plunge, and I think it's a plunge into Arctic cold water, but it's a plunge that I see as necessary because in our genealogy programs that we've had that are being advertised in a website called Conference Keeper, I've normally had anywhere between 85 to almost our capacity on Zoom participate. And I've even had a wait list of 20 people. So the popularity is there. And I've often had 20 people from out of state. And many have commented to me in a sort of a dark way that they almost wish that COVID would continue because their biggest fear is that libraries will stop doing these programs on Zoom and just completely retrench back to doing everything in-house. So I know the demand is there for this, and I know that we can't ignore doing the investigation to do workable hybrids. So if anybody needs to reach me, and I know Lev has information on that, you can go ahead and do that. And with the material that Lev's going to share with everybody, you can certainly be able to contact me. So Lev, we can go ahead with the next person.
All right, thank you, Tony. Our final presenter is Justin Jackola, who is a filmmaker and owner of JJack Productions, which is a video production company that is based out of Chicago. Justin, I will share your slide. Just give me one moment.
All good. Can people see my ugly face while they see my slide, or is it one or the other?
We can see you.
Okay, cool. Just wanted to double check with the slide up. So.
All right, I think we're good.
Awesome. Well, hey guys, super appreciate you guys hanging out. My name is Justin Jackola. I'm a filmmaker based out of the Midwest, though I am currently traveling the country in an RV, which is kind of fun. We do a bunch of different video production stuff, so I'm definitely coming from more of the tech side, more of the filmmaker side, more of, you know, production quality side. So essentially, I'm going to walk through approximately 10 things when it comes to doing live streaming stuff. I mean, even both examples that have been given so far had their differences, completely different equipment, some different programming, so on and so forth. So really the sky is the limit when it comes to what you're able to do with this stuff. I mean, it's all pretty straightforward. You need a camera that connects to the internet and that live streams something, but sometimes you can do that with 100 cameras and sometimes you can do that with your cell phone. So there really is an endless amount of levels at which you can do this. One of the things that these guys wanted me to touch base on was budget. You know, what is it actually going to cost to set up something like this? And again, unfortunately, the answer is that it completely depends. You know, sometimes clients will say to us, hey, we want you to put together a package for us that's as cheap as humanly possible, but that can still execute X, Y, and Z. Now, the question really comes is, what is the X, Y, and Z? Are you just trying to make your Zoom conversations look better? Like right now, I'm streaming through a mirrorless camera that's connected to my computer, simply to make it look nicer. It's a better angle, it's a better lens, which is going to make it look nicer. My background is naturally a little bit blurred out. You know, but this, you know, there's nobody operating that camera. It's just sitting on a tripod. You know, are you going to have an event where people are standing on stage and you need a camera operator to be following them? Do you need them to be actively zooming in and out? You know, that's going to obviously affect what equipment you're actually buying and what you're actually doing. So it is a pretty specific per situation situation. When it comes, you know, again, your cell phone itself can stream, you know, a live presentation online for people to watch. And if that's truly all you need and it's going to cost you essentially nothing just to use your facility's iPad or a laptop camera, or, you know, honestly, the best cameras are probably coming through these phones where you can take an iPhone 10 or 11 or 12 and, you know, have a decent image just because the camera quality is decent, then go ahead and do that. But if you want to take it up a level from there, it's, you know, that's when you start purchasing different equipment. So budget wise, I mean, I literally just put anywhere between $0 and $1 million. You can use your cell phone, or you could spend endless amounts of money on, you know, Rachel even mentioned, you know, we have everything that we need, but we're shy by an audio port or two. And that is really the name of the game. She was utilizing what she had, or at least the equipment that they had purchased had, you know, X amount of audio ports, you know, whether that was 2, 3, 4, and she really needed 5, 6, 7. And so what you'd have to do is you'd have to upgrade to the next audio switcher, a bigger, more expensive one with more ports that might have some more adjustability. So again, it's really just customizing to what you have existing, or building something from scratch that's going to be exactly what you want. You know, I can say, like, we had a client recently that's a law firm, and they said, hey, we want you to, we just want to do live presentations, or we want to do Zoom conversations with our investors, and we just want to look really good. You know, so basically we bought them like a light, a tripod holder, a nice but affordable mirrorless camera, you know, got a microphone that they could plug into the computer. We got the bare essentials, but it made them look 5 times better than if they were just using their laptop camera. And their spend ended up being somewhere between, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but it was between like $1,500 and $2,500. And then what ends up happening is, as they start to use the equipment, as both these guys just stated, as you start to use the equipment, you realize, oh, well, now I have this limitation because I want to do this other thing. So then you end up upgrading that portion of your package. So you just got to kind of roll with the flow and be expected to not only have technical things to troubleshoot, but then also be willing to upgrade kind of one piece at a time. But sometimes it's just that initial investment that can be a little rough on the budget. Let's see here. Camera. So basically, I'm just going to kind of go through some different pieces of equipment, and I'm going to give kind of tips on things to consider and to look out for when you're making those purchases. The first thing I'll do is a pretty big shout out to B&H Photo Video. It's a company. They always have people on staff who can answer the phone call and can answer technical questions, typically in regards to buying equipment, because they sell equipment and they want you to buy their equipment. But I would highly recommend B as in boy, H as in Henry, BH Photo Video out of New York. And you can order all their stuff online. They're a pretty big company. So for the camera, one thing you want to consider is having a clean output, a clean feed output. Now, what that means is right now, you guys are seeing me and you're just seeing the trees and the tire swing and my dog. I think you guys can see my dog right there. That's my dog Panda. But what you're not seeing is you're not seeing the little record icon and the little red dot in the corner, and you're not seeing my, my shutter settings and my aperture settings in the bottom of the screen. So my camera is capable of outputting a signal that does not have that all that information baked into the output or baked into the screen to where you guys as the audience would be seeing that. There are cameras that you literally can't do a clean feed out, and it's really unfortunate and annoying. So something to pay attention to. USB. So like right now I'm streaming out of a mirrorless camera into a USB cable into an adapter into my laptop. USB connections typically can be a little bit slower than an HDMI connection. Anthony mentioned that they have the Camling 4K. What that's called is a capture card. So if you guys are Googling which one to buy, the one that he suggested, which I believe is the Camling 4K, is a great option. It's reasonably affordable. And it's just USB to HDMI. USB goes in the computer, HDMI goes into the camera. But there are other options. And if you're going to be Googling and doing your research, you're going to be looking for video capture cards or capture cards. USBs can be a little bit slower. And the reason I'm able to do a USB out of my camera into my computer right now is because I have a special utility software that I downloaded from Sony. Sony is the manufacturer of the camera, that allows me to do that feed. Because typically you cannot just plug a camera into a computer and it works. The signal that's being output from the camera isn't readable by a typical computer input. So you need to buy something like a capture card, that Camling 4K, or have the utility software that will convert that signal into something that your computer can read, and therefore you can open it up in Zoom or Facebook Live or wherever you're doing it. Let's see what else we got here. This is just a random thing just for your own marketing. I mean, we're all looking for content, right? Like my clients are constantly like, hey, we want to have all, weekly social media video clip and all this jazz. One thing that you can do with the permission of those who are involved in the presentation is actually record onto the camera. So I have this Sony hooked up and sticking an SD card in there and pressing record on the camera while it's live streaming. What you could potentially get is additional content on that SD card that you could put on your computer later. You could edit it together and you could use that as additional social media for promoting the event, afterwards, for future events, so on and so forth, which is something that I wanted to share that some people don't think about. I mentioned this briefly, but capture card versus camera capture utility software. So the capture card is a physical thing that you plug in. It goes between your camera and your laptop, plug into that, but that's connecting the two of those. Like I said, with this camera setup that I'm using right now, I'm not using a capture card, but that's because this camera, Sony created what's called a Webcam utility software that is specifically designed for this camera. Not every camera has that utility software. You need to do your research ahead of time, or if you have an existing camera that can already do that. But essentially, it's a software that's doing what that piece of hardware does. It's converting that signal. So there is two different ways to do it. But I just wanted to share that. The next thing is audio. Obviously, audio is vastly important. When we were doing a test to get ready for today, I'm outdoors, right? I've got construction happening about a block away and it's a little bit windy out today. So we made sure to test the microphones to make sure that you guys are hearing me okay. And hopefully the audio is still good right now. But obviously, if you have bad audio, you have bad programming. It's that simple. If people can hear it, it's like they're listening to a podcast, even if the video stinks. Audio pretty much always comes first. Again, imagine watching a movie and that has terrible audio and you can hear the microphones popping and hissing and your cousin made a little short film or something like that. That's going to be much more annoying than the image itself not being great. So definitely choose audio over video, especially with programming like this through different libraries and so on and so forth. Some video chat platforms will not let you use the camera's audio, so keep that in mind. Actually just gave your laptop's microphones, right? I could have hooked up my external USB microphone that just plugs into another USB port separately and use that for some more clear audio. There are capture cards or capture devices that you can use that will have additional audio inputs and outputs that will allow you to use the microphone that's either on your camera or a separate microphone that's plugged into your camera. But there are limitations with that, so make sure you do your research. Like Zoom, for example, again, they won't let you choose your camera's audio but you can have a separate audio source, like I said, like an external USB, or if you had another adapter that would allow you to plug an audio source into your computer outside of your camera. So just keep that in mind. And then, like I said, USB mics, you can, for 20, 30, 40 bucks, you can get a USB mic that just plugs right into the side of your computer that is pretty darn solid quality. There's some really great ones out there nowadays that will just sound way, way better than a normal microphone. But do your tests as well, because I've also had clients who have purchased certain brands before we came into the picture. And when we did an actual test, the USB microphone didn't even sound as good as the laptop microphone. Again, or in the situation that's been presented already, you already have an audio system that's inside of your guys' facilities, and you're feeding that audio system then into your laptop, which is obviously going to be best case scenario. Like Rachel had mentioned, clipping on dual wireless lav mics, not the most enjoyable thing in the world. We've had to do it before, depending on, if we're filming a live presentation at McCormick Place in Chicago or something like that, and the audio team doesn't have the proper inputs or outputs to give us an audio feed to our cameras. We've had to put a separate microphone on people, so you have two microphones. But like Rachel said, it's like, then you got two clips, and for females, especially when they're wearing like a sleek dress, it's hard to hide the microphone, so on and so forth. So definitely keep that in mind. Just a really quick tip I was thinking about, though, in regards to miking is, especially for females, you can clip the wireless lav on the back of the bra, obviously with their permission and being as appropriate as possible. And then you can run that microphone up along, kind of the collar here, and hide the wire underneath the shirt. Hiding that wire is just going to make things look a little bit nicer. But obviously it's not 100% necessary if the wire is hanging out, but just to make things look a little bit cleaner. Otherwise, you can clip it on the belt on your side, feed the wire up the front of your shirt, and then clip it on the front, or feed it up under your arm. There's different options. You can also use something like moleskin, which is just a type of medical tape, to tape it to the chest versus trying to clip it on clothing. That's also something that's really useful. And again, these are kind of random tips that aren't exactly related to live streaming, 100%. But it's what makes your live stream 10 times better. Instead of hearing a loud necklace, piece of jewelry, or a shirt scratching against the microphone the whole time, there are options to kind of get that microphone so it's not rubbing against jewelry or rubbing against a piece of clothing. Like jewelry, for example, we typically just make people take it off. Hey, I know it looks beautiful on you, but if you could please remove it, because it's going to jingle the whole time and you're going to hear it in the microphone systems. The other thing is, which goes into my next point, which is like a laptop stand, right? Depending on your situation, if people are 20 feet away from the camera, it doesn't really matter. If people need their laptop, like I have my laptop propped up in front of me right now. Here, I'll show you guys the very edge of it. I got it as close as possible to the camera, so that if I'm looking at you guys, if I'm looking at my notes, right? Just I have my notes as close to the lens as possible. But the reason I bring that up is because I've had several clients who want to be speaking into a camera similar to this, doing some sort of live presentation, and we'll actually purchase laptop stands that will clip onto the tripod. Again, at that point, you want a heavier duty tripod, because once you get that heavy stand on there, plus the laptop, plus whatever else you have on there, it can be kind of weighty, so it will affect which tripod you end up purchasing, if you have a laptop stand or not. Lighting. Lighting truly can make a world of difference. Buying a simple light kit, whether you plug it into a wall or whether it's battery powered, can make a world of difference. I mean, this is a pretty simple example, but like I have, again, if you see the clip on my Instagram story, you'll see that I have a light over to the right to me right here. And I mean, if I just go over here and I turn this off, I mean, you're going to see a reasonably vast difference in regards to my exposure, right? Like I'm outside, there's quite a bit of light out here, but because the sun and the most of the light is behind me, my face is pretty dark. It just doesn't look very professional. And so if you get a really simple light, and you can use as many lights as you want. I just have a simple, it's literally 1 foot by 1 foot square that's in front of me, that's LEDs. I can change it to a more tungsten indoor color or more fluorescent like outdoor color. It's also dimmable. A lighting system can be extremely helpful. Some of you guys on your stages and stuff like that will already have those grids built in, and that's probably going to be way more than enough than you would need. But just consider that, especially if you're going to be mobile and moving around your facilities. Anthony mentioned this. The Ethernet cables are pretty vastly important. If you're doing streaming, you certainly can use Wi-Fi, but it's not encouraged. Streaming uses so much bandwidth when you have a live video feed, you need as much internet power as you can get. So hooking up an Ethernet cable to your computer while you're doing the live stream is going to be vastly beneficial. Also, a random note that I don't think I have on here, but I just thought of is sometimes cameras can overheat. So consider that as well. Live streaming is about the #1 source for overheating a camera. You can cool down your room literally physically to help cool the camera down. You can, make sure the camera stays off until the presentation starts to keep it a little bit cool. You can blow a fan at it, but then you get into audio things to consider. But just keep that in mind. Cameras can overheat. So if you're in a really hot room, or if you're outside on a really hot day doing some sort of outdoor live stream, something to consider. Also, just, with the Ethernet cable, it's like, make sure you have the right adapters, right? That's the thing, is you could have $10,000 worth of equipment set up, but if you don't have one $5 cable that you forgot or you didn't buy or whatever, your entire system won't work. So you really have to do troubleshooting, and you really have to, make yourself a little diagram and write out, okay, camera, and I need an HDMI micro to an HDMI full size, to the capture card. And the capture card is a micro USB-C. So I need to have the adapter that will go to the micro USB-C into a micro USB, or into a USB-A. Just having that figured out is one of the most stressful and difficult parts of it. So just keep that in mind. You're going to have to buy a random cable or two. You're going to have to buy a backup of those random cables or two. Some of your cables might not be long enough. When I was setting up today, my USB cable is approximately 2 feet long. I wished it was about 3 feet long because I wanted to set the camera back a little bit further, zoom in a little bit more, blur out my background a little bit more, but I wasn't able to do that simply because of the limitations of this cable, right? So just keep those things in mind. Let's see, camera charging cable. Oh, that's just, it depends on the camera that you buy, but keep in mind that, especially if you buy like a mirrorless or like a smaller, like photography style camera that can do video, you wanna make sure that the camera can be powered at the same time, like plugged into a wall, as the same time as being able to stream to your laptop. So some cameras have the limitation. If you're plugged into the laptop, you don't have a way to charge it separately. And so the camera battery might die prior to the end of your presentation, which obviously, screw you up pretty bad. So like right now, this camera that I have, which is a Sony a6600, is plugged in, and the laptop is both powering the camera and allowing a stream to come through. So I'm pretty much set, right? But ways that you can get around that if your camera doesn't do that is you can have what's called a dummy battery, which is basically looks like a battery and plugs into the battery port, but it plugs into a wall. Or a lot of cameras, especially like larger camcorders, obviously will just have a power plug in on the side, like a DC in, and that solves all the issues and you don't have to worry about it. It's just that so many people are trying to save so much money and be so affordable. They're buying these smaller, more affordable cameras that have some limitations in regards to whether they can be powered while live streaming at the same time. Camera heat, we talked about that. Most can use talked about that. Live streaming software. Again, you can pick up your phone right now. You can go to Facebook Live. You can press start streaming. You can pretty much be going immediately. You're using Facebook software. You're using your phone's camera. Nice and simple, done. Life is good, right? But again, you can just simply progress from there. Zoom might offer everything that you need if you use Zoom for everything in regards to being able to record that Zoom conversation and use it later, or being able to talk to multiple presenters at one time. But then when you get into a situation where all of a sudden you have 2 presenters in one room in different corners who are, debating each other, having a political debate or something like that. Then all of a sudden you have 2 separate cameras, maybe a third one that's showing both speakers, one zoomed in on one zoomed in on the other. You might want to be able to switch between those cameras and just show one camera at a time through a live feed. At that point, you're getting into either hardware switchers or software switchers. Hardware meaning a physical piece of hardware where you can switch by pressing different buttons or different toggles between cameras, or you have a software interface that will allow you to switch between cameras through a software interface plugged into your computer. But even to get all those cameras plugged into your computer, you're going to need some sort of switcher anyways, because you need to have the ports to plug in all those cameras and then convert that signal over to, like a capture card does, to a signal that your computer can read as an input.
Hey, Justin, we do have to get to the. Sorry to interrupt you. We want to get to the Q&A portion, just so folks have enough time to ask some questions as well.
Okay, perfect. Yep, I'm on my
All right.
last point, so that's perfect timing. The a great free software to use that's very complex and will take some time to learn, but it's free, is called OBS. You can download it online today, and it's super, super convenient. And then the last note is simply in regards to staffing and setup. You do need to be a little bit tech savvy. Again, whether you're streaming through Facebook, you're doing something simpler or more complex, you really need somebody on your team who has some idea how to use a camera, some idea how internet connections work, somebody from your IT team. A one-man band can do quite a bit, but you are going to have a little bit of a learning curve or need somebody who really knows what they're doing. So be prepared for that training process. And that's everything, guys. Hopefully that was helpful.
All right, thank you so much, and I apologize for the interruption. We have several questions that we want to be able to get through, and I'll go ahead and share the contact information for all the presenters. So if anybody does want to get in touch with them, you're able to do so. So let me just go ahead and pull that up. Okay, so some of the questions that folks have asked, and there are definitely a lot, and I apologize in advance that we won't be able to get through all of them. So one of the questions is, this is from Nancy Webster. If you have a Zoom presenter, will your program be all Zoom or hybrid with a live audience watching the screen? And any of the presenters can jump in to answer these questions.
I can hop in on that one. So we have people in our community who just do not enjoy Zoom programs. So we will be doing hybrid for everything, unless there's some compelling reason not to have it as a hybrid. We want to make sure those people who can't come into the community or into the library for a program for whatever reason, disability, inability to drive, we want them to be included. That helps build community, but we also have to respect the people who really do not enjoy the virtual experience. So we will be doing hybrid for pretty much everything we possibly can. I know someone down below asked about if the presenter will be remote and we'll have people in the room and at home. We do actually plan on testing that. That's our first move towards hybrid programs. We're going to do some tests in August with 2 of our speakers where we're going to open up our meeting room to people to attend with the speakers still remote from their home or their office. And we'll have people in our meeting room watching them remotely, and we'll have people at home watching over Zoom remotely. We're going to see how that goes, because I fully intend to bring speakers in from out of state if I find someone with a great presentation that I think my community would enjoy, and I want to make sure that it's going to work well. And that's just the best way to do it.
All right, thank you. Question, this is from Kim Murphy. Rather than have the presenter wear 2 mics, could you just put a mic near one of the near the front of the room where the speaker is?
I've tested that, and so far we're not having great success, but it could be the microphones that we're using.
Yeah, you've got a couple of different, I mean, the name of the game is getting the microphone as close to the speaker's mouth as possible. It's that simple. So when you have it literally strapped to their collar, you're going to get the best audio. There are other options, and the type of microphone that you buy certainly affects that. So if you had a microphone that was maybe, I don't know, 6 feet in front of the presenter on a stand or something like that, if you get an omnidirectional mic, which means it's trying to pick up sound from all directions, it's not going to be very helpful, especially if it's a hybrid program and you've got people talking in the audience or sounds in the room. But if you have what's referred to as a shotgun mic, which is shooting in one specific direction, which is a certain type of microphone, and you have that aimed at the speaker's mouth, you're going to get a lot cleaner and a lot better audio. So there is certainly microphones that you can do that with, and but again, you want that microphone to be as close to the presenters as possible. If it can be 6 inches in front of their mouth without being in the way, then great, do that. If it needs to be, once you get past 4, 5, 6, 7 feet, the audio gets pretty rough and echoey in a room.
And kind of going off of that, so there's a question asking if you have more than one mic in the room during a live stream, will it produce feedback, and how can you avoid that if you are using multiple mics?
The quick answer is the mic, like if you're using wireless lavs, they're designed to be on thousands of channels, so they're not going to quote unquote interfere with one another, or at least they're not supposed to be. If you get really, really, really crummy microphones, it's possible that only have like 1 or 2 channels, but most microphones nowadays have at least 10 to 20 channels that they'll automatically switch around in the background, so they're not really going to necessarily affect one another. I mean, outside of that, I mean, if you took 2 microphones and stuck them mouth to mouth, like not a wireless lav mic, but a normal like room mic, a shotgun mic or whatever, you could potentially get some feedback, but that depends on like 1,000 different factors in regards to what your grounding is like in your system, what kind of microphones they are, so on and so forth.
I'll just do about 2 more questions, and I apologize if we don't get to all of them just because we are running a little bit over. Has anyone, excuse me, has anyone investigated using a USB mixer or some sort of audio interface to get the audio into the computer as well as an in-room sound system?
I investigated it, and I'm still wrestling with it. So I don't know about anyone else. It's a little complex for me. Like I said, I'm a one-woman show, so it needs to be fairly straightforward. It needs to be something that I don't have to go back and adjust frequently. So right now I'm trying to avoid having to use that if I don't have to, or if it's something that has to be adjusted for each individual program. I'm trying to avoid that. Anthony, what are you guys using? I mean, it sounds like you've looked at some of that.
Well, we're still, I mean, the previous experience I've had with the wireless microphones, with the Veterans History Project interviews, and then also being able to look at the recording that we did of that test that we did. I mean, for me, I would probably stick definitely with the wireless microphones without any doubt, and probably not change too much, other than I saw some of the chat things coming in too about alternative devices to use in between, possibly the camcorder into the laptop and stuff like that. But that to us was the biggest, most pleasant surprise, was the sound quality with the lavalier microphones. I don't know that I would even want to go back to doing any other way with other microphones.
Like if I could find a way to make our in-room system work and I had like one microphone for both audiences, I would be happy to. But we just can't make that work because we have a listening assist system in place that's using a couple open, like the only open ports we have. So I just can't get a way to feed audio from our in-room sound system just yet. We're still investigating any upgrades we might want to make in the future, but for now, this is the approach that we're going to take.
Yeah, and just as a quick note, any of this stuff is possible. You know, when you guys are asking these technical questions of can you, all of it is 100% possible. It just completely depends on what your in-house system has. It depends on what equipment you need to buy. But you can buy whatever you need to make whatever happen. It just, you know, the change could start flying out of the pockets depending on if you don't have the right setup, or, you know, again, buying a simple audio interface could be as much as $6,000 to truly get all the inputs and outputs you need. Again, there are cheaper options and there are more expensive options for sure. You know, again, it just completely depends on your custom setup and how many mics you're trying to run, and, you know, so on and so forth.
All right, and I will just do one final questions. This is asking, so kind of all of the presentations are kind of more focused on lecture-based programs. So what about book discussions where there are multiple people, and how could they be mic'd in order for there to be good sound quality and individuals could hear the virtual attendees and in person? So how can all of that work?
So we have we're starting simple again, just so we don't have to make it too complicated for the people who are running those book discussions. But we have little omnidirectional USB Bluetooth microphones that you can gang together. So we have, I think, 3 of them that we can put in different places throughout the room, and they'll pick up sound from we only have like 10, 12 people who come. So that's enough. We use it for our board meetings too. That's enough to pick up the room sound, and you can tell who's speaking that way for the 2 or 3 people who attend on Zoom. So far, that seems to be working. If it stops working or we find a better way to do it, we'll investigate that.
All right. Well, thank you for all your questions, everybody. I'm going to leave the contact information of all our presenters just in case anybody does want to reach out with more questions. I apologize that we weren't able to get through all the questions that got submitted. So the program was recorded, as I mentioned earlier, and everybody who registered will receive the link and all the slides. We do ask that you complete the survey. I did post a link into the chat. Also, once you close out of the webinar, the survey should automatically pop up. So we'd appreciate if you took a few minutes to complete that. And with that being said, we thank you for attending and hope to see you at future LACONI events. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Lev.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.